Hey, somebody needs to dust for fingerprints. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. The Professional Noticer is sponsored this week by our friends at Tucker ATV. You know, the sheer variety of power sport products at Tucker ATV will just blow your mind. The Hustler turf equipment, the entire line of Echo power tools, and of course, Tucker ATV carries every make and model of Polaris ATVs. They have the big Polaris side-by-sides and the even bigger Ranger Cruise. And you have to see the showroom. Taxidermy, antique displays, indoor porch with a porch swing, comfortable chairs, television, free coffee, and stop in and meet Shannon and Lisa Tucker. They are just awesome. They're friends of mine. They treat customers like family, which is probably why folks from 14 states have done business with Tucker ATV. Highway 43 North in Jackson, Alabama. Tucker ATV, the small town business with the national reputation. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on The Professional Noticer. And of course, you know, we love it when somebody comes to the table with both. And today, I've got something very, very special for you guys. Have you ever been just like walking along and stumbled upon something just incredibly valuable? I don't know if you've ever done that in your life, or you were in a place and you weren't necessarily looking for something, but you found something that just it just changed everything. Well, that is kind of what I have to present to you today, because a couple or 3 years ago, I found an author's work that I listened to one of them on Audible, and from the very beginning, I was captivated. But then as the book kept going, I was just blown away. And then I realized that I had not even started at the beginning. I was starting in the middle of this guy's series. And so I went to the beginning, and I've listened to everything he has. And I'm telling you, this is one of the best writers you will ever meet. He lives in Sutton, England, and he is with us today from there. Please welcome Peter Grainger. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Andy, and thank you very much for that introduction.
Man, I'm just telling you, I am a fan. I told my staff a few weeks ago, I said, well, I know this is a long shot. I said, but see if we can find Peter Grainger. See if he will do an interview. And so I really appreciate you being here.
Okay. Now, I've not done this before. The only time I've talked before, I talked to a small group of people at what we call a Rotary Club. They raise money for charity.
Right.
And a good friend of mine was a member, and she asked me if I'd talk to them. So I did last year. That's the only other time I've done anything like this.
Now, how in the world are you not just bombarded? I mean, right now, everybody, the new Peter Grainger book is called The Cameraman, and it's the #1 new release on Amazon this morning. I mean, I'm not sure when it released, but today it's still listed as the #1 release on Amazon. And I was really aggravated, Peter, to find that it's not on Audible yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
When will that happen?
It will be. We've exchanged contracts, and so the company who create these audiobooks is Tantor. Right. We've exchanged contracts, so they will then contact Gilbert Jackson, who's been the reader from the beginning for the Smith series.
He is brilliant.
He is superb, and yes, he will fit it into his schedule. I did email him briefly a couple of weeks ago, and he seemed to be up for it, so it should happen.
Well, yeah, he'll be up for it. He's got to love doing these books, and so I'm curious. When did you start writing? I mean, you're not 25,
You
and
spotted that. Okay. Despite the makeup.
yeah. So when did you start writing?
Yeah, this is always a tricky question because you define writing. If you look up writer, it'll say someone who writes books or articles, especially in relation to making a living or as a profession.
Right.
So in that respect, I could say maybe 10 years ago. But when did I start writing, which is a slightly different question. I would say in my teens. I suddenly, in mid-teens, got quite interested in one or two school subjects, one of which was English and literature. So then I began to read a lot of poetry. Then you have to, as an adolescent, of course, you have to write some poetry, which I did. So always, I've been writing since my teens. I guess I became a writer about 10 years ago.
We need to see some of your poetry on your website. I mean, I think that would be incredibly encouraging for young people. I mean, and especially if you think, well, it wasn't that good. Okay, but look at you now, and I think to write. And tell me if you agree with this. I feel like that there is a little bit of a gift that a writer has. Maybe that desire is part of the gift, or that interest in it. But to write at a higher level, that is a skill you have to develop.
Yes, I agree completely.
And I think it's much more of a discipline than it is a talent.
Yeah.
And so now I've got so many questions I want to ask you just from me personally. And so everybody else is just going to have to listen,
Far away.
You have 10 DC Smith books. And
Yes.
and is The Cameraman the 10th?
I did quite a complicated thing here. And occasionally, I often have to explain it to new readers. So what happened was I wrote 8 DC Smith books. And at the end of the 8th book, he's in very serious trouble. And it doesn't look like he's going to make it.
Yeah, you scared me to death with that one. I'm thinking, this is the end? Oh, my gosh.
And then what I did, because I decided I couldn't just go on writing Smith one after another forever. So it was then that the 9th book was the first in the King's Lake series. The King's Lake is the town where Smith works as a policeman.
And that's Detective Chris Waters. And
yes, that's it. So then I moved the focus onto the team that Smith had trained and left behind, because I thought it would be interesting to look at his methods and influences working through them.
Right.
So yeah, that was Songbird was the first King's Lake story. There were then 3 more of those. So King's Lake then picked up its own momentum, but right. Smith appears one way or another in each one of them. Because, it's a bit of a spoiler, but he doesn't die at the end of book 8.
Right.
But he kind of makes an appearance. It's gradually diminishing in King's Lake, which I think is right, because those people are becoming more experienced, more independent, but his influence is still there.
And from the very beginning, Detective Sergeant Smith is, he is an older character. And it's like the police have kind of moved past him, or they would like to ignore him.
Yes.
But he has procedures and wisdom and a wit that, I attribute to you. You're the wit. But DC Smith has a wit that just is captivating. And he also is just, the younger officers are drawn to him.
Yes. Certain kinds of younger officers.
Right.
The ones that he identifies as a little bit left field, a little bit different, ones inclined to challenge the system. So those are the kind of people I think who gravitate towards Smith. But he also knows fundamentally they are the best detectives. Those kind of people.
Right.
So yeah, Kingslake built up its own momentum, and then I thought, is there a way to bring him back? He couldn't rejoin the police because in the very first book he's talking about retiring. So then in The Truth, there was a way to bring him back through an agency of detectives that he'd encountered earlier.
Right. Chris Waters' dad, right?
No, he has a rival detective agency. The young people he teams up with are the divers, the brother.
That's right. That's right. The girl that Chris Waters was sweet on for a while, but she's kind of a crooked. Yeah.
Yeah. She's a kind of crazy character, but they're very smart, these two young people. And eventually Jason Waters finds a way just to pull Smith into something. And then The Cameraman, which went out 1st of February, is his second case with the divers agency, where he's operating very much on his own.
Now I've got a complaint for you. I mean, I hate to do this on air, but I've got a complaint, and I don't really understand this because I think, I mean, you are top 5 that I've ever read. I mean, I'm just telling you, and so as I would as I would listen to your books, I would listen on Audible, and I would bookmark places, and I've told people for a long time that a good author can keep you interested in the whole book, but a great author will have you interested in the rabbit trails. I mean, the rabbit trails are just brilliant. And I would laugh out loud at how D.C. Smith would correct Chris Waters, his young protege, would correct his English, would correct his grammar. And so I knew that my wife was just going to love these books, but she won't listen to Audible. She's not an audio person. And so I said, well, I'm going to buy you these books. I'm going to buy you the whole series of these books, and you're just going to love them. And then I went on, and the books aren't in print. They're only Kindle.
Yeah.
Why are they not in paper, Peter?
Well, there's 2 answers. The first one is that to get quality paperback, hardback books, even today, you basically need agent and publisher behind you.
Right.
And my writing has since I first sent things off in my 20s onwards, has always been turned down. So no agent or publisher has ever said, yeah, send us some more. So I don't have.
Are you publishing these books?
So everything you see on the Kindle is basically me, and I don't have any. There are people who help me, and I'm going to give them credits, but I don't have an editor. I don't have an agent. I don't have a publisher because as I say, I never was successful in that way. So a few years ago, it was my other son said, who knows a lot about the tech, said, well, you could always stick it on a Kindle. And I knew nothing about it. I didn't own a Kindle. So I looked into it and followed his advice. He's helped me enormously to get this off the ground. So they went on to the Kindle. They exist as ebooks, therefore.
Right.
A few years later, a very determined young American lady running an audiobook agency said to me, why don't you give Smith a go? And I said no 2 or 3 times, but eventually she persuaded me to put it into an audiobook. It worked. Now Amazon do have a print option, and they're trying their best to develop it. I've looked at 1 or 2, and it doesn't work for me yet. It doesn't feel like the quality thing you expect from a bookshop.
Right.
So I haven't gone down that route yet. That's the second reason why.
I'm stunned because the quality of what you're producing It's extraordinary.
Mm.
And the stories and the procedures.
Mm.
I mean, how did you learn this? What is your background?
Okay. The first mistake I made was I went and did a degree in English literature. And I
Right.
think that's not the best thing for a writer to do, as many others have said before me, because you learn in great depth how to pull things to pieces, which is the opposite of what you need to be doing as a writer. So it took me a few years to get over that. My earliest years after the degree, I went into business. I worked in various jobs. A business folded and wanted me to relocate, and I said, no, I'm not going. So then I retrained as a teacher. So around about 30, I started teaching English, and that was then my main career until I retired. So teaching English, which is simultaneously the best and the worst job, depending on whether you're facing the students or the management, um, um, was very useful in a way. Because if you've got, a class of bright children saying, I still don't get point of view, can you explain it to me again? You have to really work it. And then you understand it yourself. You don't really understand anything until you've taught it, I think.
Until you can explain it to somebody else.
Yeah, in different ways for different people.
Right.
So that was a great help to me. And in my final 10 years of teaching, I was almost exclusively teaching advanced level students, pre-university. So then, that's some then demanding literature. And I think that was, at the same time, I'm still writing. So I'm teaching full time, then I taught part time. But the only time I could find to write was I'd get up at 5 a.m, do a couple of hours, and then go off and do the day job. So that's how I was writing. When I thought I'm going to give it a serious one more go, that's what I was doing. So background is mainly teaching.
If you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you did your first book?
Oh well, I've written books which no longer exist. So I was continuing trying to write right from when I was teaching. At 30, I was trying to write. The poetry had gone. I realized that writing prose was much more difficult than writing poetry. So I was writing from then. A few things were binned. The first book on my website is written under the other name, Robert Partridge. That is Afon. That's the first one I put on Kindle. That would be, I'm trying to think now, that was written maybe 15 years ago.
Wow. Wow. And your your ebooks and your audiobooks have been downloaded all over the world. Do you have any idea how many countries?
Probably 20 or more. As many
and what
basically as many as Amazon have the Kindle available in. It's not available in every country.
Right. And
But
what is your,
go on.
I was just going to ask what your favorite or your most important market is.
America.
Is it?
Absolutely. I was really surprised. I assumed it would be the UK. But the UK now is often in third or fourth place. So my four biggest markets are America, Canada, Australia, and the UK. But America is far and away the most important in terms of numbers.
I am curious about that, but I'm not surprised. I'm curious about it, but I'm not surprised. My books have done far more overseas than they've done here. But I am curious as to what explanation do you have for that? Because you're doing these books, the Kings Lake investigation, The Willows and Lane, which we haven't mentioned, that's the two ladies, an older lady and a younger lady working together, and then the DC Smith, and so they're procedurals. I mean, they are steeped in what happens with a suspect, what happens when he's arrested, what happens, before trial, and I would think that would be more interesting to people in your country, but maybe it's just fascinating to me because there are differences in what our people experience or hear about, and in what is in this book. But
I haven't tried to fully analyze it because I don't think it's wise to look a gift horse in the mouth, as we say.
probably
Just
not.
appreciate it. I think I get a lot of correspondence from American readers and listeners. And first of all, they still love things English. And I think there's a lot of Englishness in the books and in Smith. It doesn't try to be anything else. So I think that is one reason. But another reason, and it's one of the things that has surprised me, and I don't mean that in any disrespectful way, but it is American readers who want to engage at a deeper level in terms of talking about the narrative methods, the development of character, the importance of landscape. It's invariably my American readers, and some of them have become correspondents, who are very knowledgeable about that. Now, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know how literature is taught in American schools and colleges. I literally don't know. But I'm pleasantly surprised by the depths of knowledge and interest of American readers. Perhaps you've got an idea as to where that comes from.
Well, you said you're not sure how literature is taught in America, and my immediate answer is not very well lately. But in the past, it has been.
That may be significant because the readers I'm talking about are older readers. And the profile of my readership certainly is older, to very old, rather than young. So I may be looking at the education system in America 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, there's a good chance of that, unfortunately. But I have turned a bunch of people on to your books who are great readers, and like me, they just I mean, I can't say enough. And if you're watching this and you're kind of like, sometimes you read a mystery or a thriller or police, this is a must. Peter Grainger's books they're the best of the best. And I've often thought, when I was almost through, I've often thought, I'm going to wait a little bit. I'm going to do this again, because I just, I think a great book is somewhat like music. It has timing, and certainly the dialogue has to have timing. And your dialogue is so sharp. Your rabbit trails are blistering and interesting, and
that's a new term to me. So you're talking about like the sidetracks, or we might call it a red herring. You're going off and
I just call it a rabbit trail because it like when DC Smith and Chris Waters are driving along and they're in a conversation, and Chris says something, and then DC Smith corrects him, and Chris says, "What?" And he says, "It's this. It's not you and I. It's you and me, because you wouldn't say so and so." And it is this thing, and it's brilliant, and you can just see that happening, and you can see the older guy being a little bit like, "Oh God," and the younger guy going, "What did I do?" It's just. it is so real. And I want to say to people who will immediately stop watching this and go buy a Peter Grainger book. There are police series in America that I read a lot, and there are some police series in the past that I couldn't listen to. I couldn't read anymore because they got too gory or too into the mind of the killer, and I don't want to live in the mind of the killer. I don't want to see what he does to some child, or I don't want to live that moment by moment. You can reference it, but I don't. I just can't. And so these books, the Kings Lake investigations and D.C. Smith and Willis and Lane, somehow they have all the action, all the visualization, without going into something that I think is kind of bad for you. You know,
I completely agree, and that was partly my intention. That was deliberate from the start. When I decided to move away from the books published by Robert Partridge, which are kind of literary standalones and not crime, and I was thinking, and I'd had a bit of reaction to those, and thought, oh, well, could be something here. This is just as ebooks on the Kindle. So then I thought, well, if I was going to write in a genre that might sell more books and find a wider readership, what would it be? So I studied the Kindle data. Right at the top of the list, the thing you should write if you want to, to be successful is romance. Well, there wasn't a hope
yeah.
that I could write a romance novel. And then it was something like mystery and paranormal. About third was crime fiction. And I thought, well, maybe because I like a good crime series on the television. I hadn't read much crime fiction, and I still haven't. But I thought maybe I could do that. So I did read some of the popular books at the time. And the thing that struck me was how dark and dysfunctional the police are, never mind anybody else.
Yeah.
They're all living disastrous lives. They're all alcoholics. They're all drug addicts or philanderers. And I thought, surely it can't be like this. So I set out to see if it was possible to write a detective who was more normal. He had to be different in some way. He had to stand out, but not in those dark ways. And so that was the intention from the beginning, to create an alternative kind of protagonist as a detective.
How did you? I can see how you would be interested in the crime and police, but how did you learn that? I mean, that is because you're very detailed, and I mean, you're not glossing over things, and so. But I would imagine. I mean, I know. When I've read. I read a book and it somebody will say, and he entered the room and took the safety off the Glock, and I'm like, because a Glock pistol doesn't have a safety, and they're talking about he was duck hunting and he pointed his rifle at him. Well, it's like, come on, you don't know anything about this, and so I would imagine, as detailed as you are, that people would be coming out of the woodwork if you were not accurate in this. How did you learn this?
Well, that is research. That's really the only research I do, is into that technical side of policing. So sadly, if there's a good program coming up on the television about that aspect of police work, I might be sitting there with a notepad and pick out a couple of things. A lot of it is online. If you're prepared to do the reading, you can find amazingly detailed procedures and pathologists talking online. So yeah, that's I don't do masses of planning, but in fact, sometimes I hardly do any. But the one thing I do look into carefully is what you just pointed out. Procedurally, it has to be right. And I've had a few ex detectives and a couple of even of current serving detectives who've read the books and contacted me and said, "Yeah, it's pretty close, so that's close enough."
Yeah, yeah. So, what is your, when you're writing, what does a typical day look like? Are you an early writer, a late writer? What do you do?
It has to be early. So, as I said, when I was still full time working, I'd get up at 5 in the morning, do an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and then go to work. And then I retired slightly early from the teaching so that I could give writing a proper go. But I still, when I'm actually have started a book and want it to build up momentum, I basically start about 6 o'clock in the morning. And typically, I will read through yesterday's work first just to get the continuity. I usually have a target, so I try and write at least 1,000 words a day. And sometimes I'll have that done by 10. Sometimes it's midday, but basically it's mornings. Yeah.
When uh, you mentioned that you're not a planner. I always think there's two kinds of writers. There's the the structured, like, lay it out by outline, and then there's the seat of the pants writer. Which are you?
Seat of the pants.
Really? And so that fascinates me, especially with this genre, because you're like flowing through what is happening as you're writing, and you would think that something this technical might, and when I say technical, I don't want to throw anybody off. This is not like reading a technical book. This is a story, and they are great stories, but they have details in them that I, I'm fascinated that you write that seat of the pants.
Some of the, yeah. So if I know there's some important forensics involved in a scene that's coming up, I will have done the research. I will have made a set of bullet points of the key things that I picked out of that research that might fit into a story. And then on the morning I'm writing, I get to that point, I've got the page, glance over it, and select something which may be relevant. Uh, but some of the Smith books literally began with a vague idea and an opening sentence. Off we go, and see where it goes. So I have a vague idea of how this case might go, but sometimes it's changed radically by something that's happened as I was bringing out the story. So yeah, I'm not a huge planner, and I don't think it's a way to tell young people to write. I think you should just write.
Yeah, I'm not a planner either. I'm definitely a seat of the pants person, and I always feel like I can I mean, before I say what I kind of have to have, what do you have to have in your mind before you start a book? I mean, do you have to have the kind of semi plot? You have to have the characters. You have to have what's going to happen. What do you have to have? And then you go, okay, I can start.
Um, place, uh, place is quite important, I think, in the novels. Um, um, Not in a highly literary sense of pathetic fallacy or anything like that, but the setting for the Smith and Kingsley stories has been really important. It's a theme which has developed, and again, a lot of the American readers seem to like that. In fact, I know some have visited England and they've been to Norfolk and had a look at the coast and think, because that's where he worked. So that place is important. That is actually a good question. These days, it's the thing I find hardest, which is to getting that initial idea clear. So, who's going to be the central focus? What kind of a crime is it? they're not always, the Smith cases now aren't always murders, and it's outrageous that you can get away with that, but you can. Whereas the Kings Lake detectives have now gone into a murder squad, so it has to be a murder. I don't want to have any repeats or copycat murders, so I'm always looking for a different kind of murder that might make a new book.
Right.
And as you've ticked off each one, of course, there's fewer to go at. So I'm waiting for the next big idea to come along at the moment.
I always feel like, do you title your books before you start writing?
No.
No? I kind of have the title in my mind before I start writing. Now I'm not in your league. I'm not even anywhere close to what you do, but I'm just telling you this. I'm just trying to, my procedure, I suppose, is I have the idea, I have the title, and if I can figure out an ending, then I can write to that. And I may go, but if I have that,
I would agree. I would agree with that. Sometime early on, chapter 3, 4, 5, 6, I am hoping that the destination is kind of becoming visible. And then it's a question of how interesting it's going to be to get there. But yes, I don't get near the end and think, how am I going to end this? Because the ending has formed well before that. Yeah, that is true. But again, I don't sit down and write all that out on a piece of paper. This is the ending.
Yeah, I don't either.
I have a sense of where it's going.
Yeah. Which book was it that they went to the oil rig?
Okay.
Do you remember? I mean, people do this to me, and I can't remember. I hate to even do that to you. But DC Smith and Chris Waters, they were
I'm getting in a dangerous position here now, because there are readers and listeners who've been through them multiple times and who know the book far better than I do.
I agree. I agree. I was in a group of people that were working to take one of mine and make it into something else, and it was like 14 people in the room, and I'm in there with them, and they're talking about this book, and I realized I had not read this book in 12 years, and they had all read it 12 times in the past 6 months. And so they, so they're talking about the characters, and so then they look at me and say, "Is that all right with you?" And I'm like, "I guess." I don't really remember. So
I've been asked questions about minor characters in books, and I have to go to the book and think, who was it? What did he do?
Well, what is on the horizon for you?
The book you were asking about is Luck and Judgment.
Luck and Judgment.
That was the third book, and that was the guy who went missing off the oil rig, but didn't. It's just assumed he had.
That was great. So what's on the horizon for you, Peter?
I've had a busy week or two, as you know yourself. When a book goes out, there are emails and things to be done, and so that's occupied me for the past couple of weeks with the cameraman. I then have to, and before that it was the Willows and Lane, not long ago. So I'm now looking at what comes next. Is it another Smith, or do we go back to Kings Lake?
Either is fine with me. Either. I mean, if you needed my approval for either, I'm fine with either.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's good to know that. Maybe I could just do a poll of the readers, but my email box would fill up. So
yeah, I always think don't ask them what they want. Because I think if Henry Ford had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So I think what we want is up to you. So I really appreciate you being with us today. And how can we help you, Peter? We're going to put your all the contacts on the show notes and all, but can you think of any way right now that we can help you? Because we're going to spread the word about your books, obviously, but
there isn't a specific thing. I mean, I really appreciate you inviting me on. I've never done anything like it before. And so, yeah, and I do appreciate the people who, again, especially American readers who have got my books into public libraries by campaigning. I know they've done that. That's been an enormous help. And one or two other people. Judy Collins is a reader of mine.
Really?
So yeah, so we've been in touch for years, and I regularly hear from her. When's the next one, and so on. So, and I know that she has promoted the books as well. So I'm just incredibly grateful that it's got to where it's got. I never dreamed it would.
Well, now that I've got your email, I'm going to start bugging you too. So I really appreciate it. And so if you're watching or listening, you guys look at the show notes and figure out how to get a hold of some Peter Grainger books right away. The first one, the D.C. Smith book, that is the first one, is An Accidental Death. And it'll grab you right off the bat. So
it's important to read them in order.
Yeah. I found that out after I started in the middle, but I went back and the one that I read first, when I started back with An Accidental Death, I read that one again. I went through that one again just to keep the continuity, because it's brilliant what's happening in his life as all that goes. And so anyway, thank you so much for your time, Peter. We appreciate you.
It was a pleasure.
I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Attorneys for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional funding provided by the readingglassessolution.com. Have you reached the time in your life where menus, instructions on gadgets, and the directions on a prescription bottle are just too difficult to read? Have you started using reading glasses? And if you have, how quickly did you lose your first pair? In fact, statistics show that most people spend more time looking for their readers than actually reading with them. At thereadingglasssolution.com, we're here to make your life easier. With our patented system, we can virtually guarantee you never waste time searching for lost glasses again. Simply log on to thereadingglasssolution.com, put in your physical address, add the power reading glasses you use, pay $349 by credit card, and know your worries are over, because we will handle the rest. Utilizing our special relationships with manufacturers in China, we get really good deals on reading glasses, and minus a small profit, we'll obtain as many reading glasses in your vision power as possible. Then, in our personal company biplane, thereadingglasssolution.com will literally crop dust your property with your glasses. You can leave them where they are and just pick up a pair when it's needed, or move them around to strategic locations. In any case, you'll never be without reading glasses again. We are thereadingglasssolution.com.